All right, I think we'll slowly get things moving. So first of all, a warm welcome to everybody today. Today's webinar is going to be around how we can leverage insights from sensor technology to help make our decisions around how to operate our buildings smarter, more efficient, and help us with our sustainability efforts. We're living in a really exciting time where over the past decade, there's been a lot of momentum in the smart building space, be it on the hardware side, IoT, software, machine learning, all these things that really didn't exist a decade or two ago have started to make their way into the smart building space. And this can really help us with our goals of decarbonizing and taking on what is probably the world's biggest challenge today. Of course, to make any technology successful, you need to implement it. So there's people, there's processes, there's the technology itself. And so that's really what we're hoping to go into a little bit today. What are some of the challenges that we're running into, that people are facing, and what are some strategies to really make the most out of this technology and ultimately hit our goals? So just a few housekeeping items before we get started. This webinar is live. So Aaron and myself make sure we don't say anything that we're going to regret. It's also recorded and it's going to be available on demand later. So if you need to drop off, you missed the last few minutes, don't worry, there will be a recording that you can watch afterwards. This is about 45 minutes long. Aaron and I are probably going to chat for around 30, and then we've got 10-15 minutes for questions. On the topic of questions, there is a Q&A tab. So if you can't see that, it's there's the 3 dots on Zoom, more, and then under there's a Q&A. So if you do have any questions, you can throw those at any time throughout the discussion into the Q&A. And at the end, we will go through those one by one. Hopefully we have time to get through them all. If not, we'll be sure to follow up with everybody directly afterwards to make sure that your question does get answered. At the end of the session, we'll also have a poll with a post-webinar survey. We can get your feedback. If there are things that you want to hear more about or you'd like to hear specific content in the future, then throw that into the survey. It's really helpful for us to make sure that we are constantly bringing you content that is interesting and valuable and going to help you with understanding what's going on in the world of smart buildings, indoor air quality, etc. All right, so that's all the housekeeping. Let's get started. So quick self-intro. I'll introduce myself as well as Kaitera, and then hand the mic over to Aaron Brondum, who is the VP of Customer Success at Prescriptive Data. So he can introduce himself as well as Prescriptive Data. So quick intro from my side. I was actually at Greenbuild 2 weeks ago, and I was told to stop introducing yourself in the the boring way, and you should really start with this, which is that I used to be, in a previous life, I was essentially full-time martial artist, practicing Kung Fu for about 8 hours a day in the Shaolin Temple. I then went on and made adventure documentaries and spent a couple of years floating around in the ocean and in various jungles. And then by some strange turn of events, landed in this life today, where I'm the co-founder and CEO at Kaitera. I focus on a lot of energy on product and making sure that we're building the right thing to solve pain points for our customers. And at Kaitera, we are an air quality monitoring and management platform. So our goal is really to help companies improve their indoor environment, understand what's going on so they can create a better indoor environment for their employees and occupants, and also create a better environment for our planet. So reduce the amount of wasted carbon and wasted energy in our buildings. So that's a brief intro to myself, and hand it over to Aaron.
Thanks, Liam. I unfortunately don't have as an exciting background as you. I've been stuck in this smart building world for 20 plus years. So hopefully I'll get to the Kung Fu side of my life, maybe at the later stages, but excited to be here. Glad to meet everybody, and excited to have this conversation. A little bit about Prescriptive Data. We're a software company. It's a smart building and real estate sustainability climate tech company. Our product is called Nantum OS. So the name of the company is Prescriptive Data. Sometimes we just go by PD. Our product is Nantum, which you'll see a lot in the industry and media. And it's focused on decreasing carbon emissions while optimizing tenant comfort, at a property, and it's AI and machine learning based, and it's been selected by quite a few large names out there. JP Morgan Chase for one, Brookfield Properties, James Towns are among a few of the notable names that we have that are using our product. As far as my role here at Prescriptive Data, like Liam said, I'm the VP of Customer Success. What does that mean? I look after a few different things here. One is grid services. So as you might hear the word GEBs and interacting with the grids, we're focused on the grid directly. We're focused on that. I look after all of our client onboardings and installations, supporting the clients afterwards, professional services, and then also project development. So excited to be here and have this conversation.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Aaron. Really excited to delve into some of these topics. So today we're talking about smart building technology, especially around building data and how we can sort of operationalize that data, create better operations. Maybe to get started, we can start at the high level, which is the building owners. And I'd love to get your thoughts on what's driving building owners today to make changes. I also love to get, the poll has already popped up. Exactly. So I'd love to get the thoughts of everybody on this call. You can see the poll there. What is your top goal or motivation as a building owner or manager? Now, I know there are several different sort of profiles that are in this call today. We've got people working specifically in HVAC. We've also got some building owners or building managers. Definitely feel free to fill out the poll here. And if you're not a building manager yourself, then I think it'd be really valuable if you can share for maybe your colleagues, the people that you work with who are in that role, what are their primary motivations so that we can get a holistic view of everyone on the panel. There's a lot of different topics that are driving this. There's energy savings, decarbonization is obviously something that we hear about a lot. I mean, Aaron, you and I were at Green Build last week, and I probably heard decarbonization 10,000 times during that very short period of time, which is great. Of course, that should be our number one priority as like a human race, considering the challenges that we have. We also hear a lot about ESG. Okay, it looks like we've got results from the polls where reducing operational costs is number one, followed by attracting or retaining tenants with corporate ESG and abiding by carbon-related state or local legislation. There's also some comments coming into the chat probably. So, Aaron, from your side, what are you seeing in your day-to-day work with building owners? Like what are the goals, motivations that are causing to select and implement technologies like this?
Right. So, energy savings historically has been one of the leading factors for decisions for adopting new technology or, installing new equipment. But part of the reason it's there and historically has always been there because it provides an ROI. And people that are running real estate, it's primarily focused on let's do these projects, let's help our assets increase the NOI, but then all these projects need to have an ROI to them to help them make those decisions. Historically, there's companies that have been solely focused on that, and really at Prescriptive Data, we lead with that because that's how real estate knows how to buy products like Nantum. But we are starting to see that decarbonization, ESG goals, health and wellness are new things that are coming up and new driving factors in adoption of these new technologies.
So I noticed, the number of times that you said historically just now stood out to me. That historically energy savings has been sort of the real driver there. Is that, and it sounds like there's a bit of a shift. I mean, where in that journey are we from energy savings being, let's say, the sole driver to maybe one small driver out of many different aspects? Where are we today, and do you still see that changing more?
Yeah, I like to break real estate down into, particularly around commercial real estate, into two separate buckets. One is those owner operated and occupied space. So historically, if I own a building and my employees are in it, I'm going to be highly focused on, and historically have been highly focused on, driving energy efficiency in that building. If you're into that more traditional owner, potentially operated but then leased out space, the way that leases are written is those energy costs are passed down to the tenant. And so it's been difficult to sell energy projects to some of those types of owners. And as we're starting to see legislation come into play, now those owners are taking a harder look at it, and they're having to make some decisions. And not just, in previous, I'd present something with maybe a 2-year or 1-year payback. And it was prior to even working at Prescriptive Data, they always would look at me as like, why do I care? My tenants pay the energy bills here. But now we've got local legislation. We also have large companies that are making, global commitments. And so that's an important part. If I'm going to lease space in your building, it needs to, be driving to energy efficiencies. It needs to be driving to net zero. Has really amped up, particularly the conversation for those types of buildings.
Yeah, interesting. I had some takeaways that I had from a lot of the discussions and being on several of the panels at Greenbuild as well as Verge the week before that, which are really two conferences really focused on sustainability. And there were a few interesting things that stood out to me. It's the amount of attention being paid to, say, decarbonization versus energy, which to the layman can often seem like the same thing. I'm saving energy, and that means that there's a lower carbon footprint, but they're not exactly. It's not a sort of a one-for-one relationship. They're not exactly the same thing. And so a really big trend in that direction around sort of holistically saying, how can we decarbonize, not just how can we reduce X dollars, how can I reduce this bill that I have, this cost, and looking at ROI very differently. In the words of a very well-spoken gentleman on a panel at Verge, I think he said, "F your ROI, it doesn't matter anymore." If we're all underwater 30 years from now, we should maybe we need to stop thinking about how quickly can I pay this back, because there are other costs that are hidden, and I think there's a lot of discussion like that that's driving the adoption of these technologies as well. We see that with IAQ. There's been a really big uptake around occupant well-being and how can we measure that? How can we improve that? And not just driven by COVID. There was, of course, a spike from COVID where everyone's concerned about people coming back to work. But what I think we're starting to see from really spending a lot of time in the industry over the past couple of weeks or a couple of months is that is really here to stay, and people are starting to realize the very deep relationship between decarbonization, energy efficiency, and indoor environmental quality, and how these things are all really, really closely interconnected. So I mean, it's definitely been great to see that whatever the motivation, there are a lot of different motivations. There's a big surge of interest in the smart building space. What are some of the challenges that you see building owners facing when they're trying to adopt these technologies today?
Yeah, I think it goes back to your comment of forget the ROI. Real estate's a lagger when it comes to technology. It's a very conservatively run business. And there's tried and true years over years of how they've owned and operated these facilities. So when you're bringing in something new, it could just be as simple as, how do you buy a software as a service product? Either it's Kytera or Nantum OS is tough for them to even just wrap their heads around, because they've never had that as a budget line on their budget before. And it's makes their head spin a bit. We all used to buy CDs with Microsoft Office on it, and some of Soldiers people remember that, but now we don't think twice about it, but we're paying an annual fee for that. It's no different than what we're doing there. So that's one of the challenges. It's transformation on how you buy it, but then it's new. It's new technology that is not your traditional BAS or BMS or EMS, whatever you want to call it. There's no box that serves up everything. You need a service contractor for it, so it can be very disruptive to it. One of the other challenges as well is sometimes the infrastructure that's within your building isn't updated, isn't managed, isn't maintained. Owners may prioritize a lobby renovation that might be $1 million over a network infrastructure project that would be, $80,000. But they're both, should be looked at similarly, because they're also increasing the value to your building and your property, as lenders are looking at it and understanding, like, what is the technology that's in this building? How does this building perform energy wise, and how does it compare to others similar assets?
Yeah. I mean, one of the tied to that, one of the big challenges that we see is around sort of siloed systems, and everyone's probably seen that image where you've got the BMS operator with 25 different screens, all in front of each other, and one's running the elevators and one's running the security cameras, and it's all separated. And I think the big challenge here, and obviously this is something that you guys are addressing, which is how can you have all that data go into one place and then be shared so that systems like Kythera can benefit from other data points within the building, because the intelligence that we can apply to the measurements taken inside a building, if we understand what else is happening inside the building, or even just the physical structure of the building, is going to be massively higher than just some data points. But unfortunately, most buildings are not set up that way, and there is no sort of one data lake where everything sits, and different services there can pull the data that they need in the vast majority of buildings. Is that also I mean, how do you guys work with a situation like that in an existing building where there are so many different pieces of maybe mechanical equipment throughout the building that are not tied to each other in any, or in a very traditional way that's hard for anybody else to come in and add intelligence on top of?
Yeah, great question. And Liam, that's why we exist as a company. We were born out of a large real estate owner operator, and that's the problem they were trying to solve. They saw the future. Saw that we have all these smart systems, and think of it as the nervous system within a building. I've got my elevators, I've got my HVAC controls, I've got future technologies, I've got security access systems. All these silos need to be broken down, and this data put into a central location and structured in a way that we can correlate patterns between the disparate data sets and make better operational decisions on how we operate our building and understand it. That's at the heart of what Nantum is. Nantum, at the heart, it's a middleware. It's that data lake. It's just hard for people to quite get that, because you can't really see it. So we tend to focus a lot on the user interface and the insights you get there, but at the heart of it is it's a secure data platform where it can bring in old technology into it. It can bring in new third party via APIs, similar to what we're doing with Kythera. But then all these other IoT devices that are coming online, and you're starting to see it really disrupt the industry a bit. But those that are adopting it and leveraging platforms like what we've built are standardizing it, and they're seeing it, and they're seeing the benefit, benefit from it.
Yeah, no, that's very clear and makes total sense. It's definitely a huge gap in the way a lot of existing buildings, and new buildings are built. So let's maybe shift gears for a moment and talk a little bit about energy management optimization. That was in the poll, the number one thing probably around energy management optimization. So at Kythera, our focus is typically on indoor air quality, indoor environmental quality. So maybe for those people on the webinar that aren't too familiar with building energy management, could you shed some light on that and help educate us a little bit?
Yeah. So there's lots of acronyms that get thrown out. We call BMS, Building Management System, BAS, Building Automation System, EMS, Energy Management System, EMIS, Energy Management Information System. We throw these terms around a lot, and some of these terms are really helpful, and we've done a lot of work in collaboration with the DOE and the GSA, and they recently did a study of our product, and they called the study it's EMS, so Energy Management Information System, which historically tends to just have energy data in it, but then they threw another acronym on it called ASO, which is automated system optimization, which is what we do. But they're also missing that it's also connecting to IAQ devices like you have, occupancy type devices that that we get from other third parties, along with those existing HVAC control systems that are in the building. So EMS is energy, ASO is automated. What we like to call it is a building operating system. It's a brain that connects to all the different platforms into that you have in your facility, and then brings all that data, drives decisions from it, and increases operational efficiency. Be it energy might be the priority, tenant well-being, space conditions might be a priority. But one of the key components behind it as well, one of the driving factors, is leveraging AI and ML. Those are the game changers. That's how we're really, ingesting this data, making sense of it, and doing it quickly, and making smart decisions. And it's also future-proofing a facility, knowing that there's going to be new technologies, there's going to be new sensors, there's going to be new devices, and how do I make sure that I've got a platform that's available to ingest that? So hopefully that explained a little bit. It can get it can be a little bit of an alphabet soup out there. But what we're ultimately trying to get at is break down data silos, get all the information, understand what the priorities are from the ownership side, be it energy efficiency, saving kWh, energy demand reduction, kW, tenant comfort might be the highest priority, so they'll spend a little bit. Decarbonization is another part of it, which isn't necessarily directly translates to kW, kWh. That has to do with the energy that's coming from the grid. It's just getting really complex, and these equations are getting more complicated, but having an AI ML powered platform to make those decisions quickly for you is really the future.
So maybe what and I know we've got some little bit of time allocated to talk about some examples, but maybe we can just jump into one quickly, just so that we can make sure to ground sort of the theory of what we're talking about in sort of real life examples. I mean, can you share maybe a couple case studies with us when it comes to sort of energy management? What are some of the outcomes that you've seen with a building adopting a system like this?
Right. So one of the key factors that we'd all like to think we understand how buildings are utilized, and how people are coming and going into the space. But it's interesting, one of the key things that we feel is critical to when it comes to optimizing is understanding the occupancy, not just are there people in the space, how many people are in the space, when are they coming in, when are they leaving, and a lot of times when I talk to building operators, and it tends to be it's a field that's struggling to find new talent, people are aging out of it, is really what we're doing is taking information that they probably already had in their head. They just unfortunately don't have the time and the resources to sit in front of a computer and make minimal adjustments all day long. So example is, hey, it's a holiday weekend, it's Friday, I know because I've worked in this building for 15 years, everybody's going to leave early because the weather's nice. I can start, reducing my fan speeds, cutting back on my chillers, and saving energy. So what we're doing is we're looking at those patterns in real time, understanding it, but then automating those types of decisions to take what a building engineer typically could do if they had the time and weren't running around the building, and making these small incremental adjustments to save them energy. And we've saved anywhere from 8% to 26% in energy in a building.
Yeah, that's super helpful. And I think to speak from the IAQ side, there's often been this idea that indoor air quality and sustainability or let's say healthy buildings and sustainability are opposed and are pulling into two different directions, which is in many ways true. If you want a really healthy building, you're probably putting a lot of air into it, you're ventilating a lot, you're bringing outside air, and you're filtering it, which obviously consumes energy. And And that's going to be really healthy for the occupants. You probably also have floor to ceiling windows because it's, you get all that great light. Also not great in terms of sustainability. Then on the other side, if you want to have the perfect sustainable building, well, you should probably just make a concrete block with no windows and no air conditioning, right? It's zero energy consumption. Not so good for the people inside. And so that's where I think we've seen a lot of opportunity to create very measurable benefits, is making sure that, for example, like to your example, if a floor is not occupied, maybe you stop pumping air into it. If a floor has been rearranged, this is something that we've seen a lot recently, because we've shifted from full-time work to hybrid work, or sometimes work from home, sometimes work in person. And what that means is that a lot of buildings, you'll get an entire building that gets shut down. If you're a campus, for example, let's say you've got 25 buildings, maybe 10 of them are going to be shut down, and people are going to be funneled essentially into the remaining 10 buildings, for example. And that means suddenly now that you need to rearrange your space, you need more conference rooms. And the thing with, the challenge is the way that we've traditionally done sort of air quality and planning on the mechanical level is based on a design. It's based on a theoretical plan of how this space should be used, which sounds nice, but in reality, we know that sometimes spaces are not used in the way that they were intended when an architect or an engineer drew those plans. Especially when you get a pandemic thrown in the middle, people come back, the entire way that you work changes, and suddenly if you have twice as many conference rooms or you don't have open floor offices anymore, then fundamentally your systems might not be suited to that. And so it's really about thinking, okay, how can I measure what's happening? How can I see how this ties to the actual way that the spaces are used? And then if changes need to be made, then we make changes. And similarly, we've seen potential reductions of 25% in energy that's just being wasted. We saw this with a few companies in the Bay Area that teams aren't talking to each other. You've got one team that is in charge of occupant well-being. You have another team that's in charge of the BMS. You've got another team that's in charge of sustainability and hitting their net zero goals. And none of the teams are talking to each other. And sometimes you just need the data to come and sit in the middle and say, hey, like, look, there's a problem here.
We've got a really, really great example. Well, two really good examples of that. To touch on your point about COVID is, nobody was coming to work. Nobody's coming to the office. So you'd expect the amount of energy that commercial real estate was using would drop significantly.
Right.
It dropped that much. And one of the reasons is, the CDC ASHRAE came out with, hey, you need to run your fans 2 hours earlier in the morning. You need to run them 2 hours later in the day. And we have an owner operator down in DC, and they've got floor by floor air handlers, and we have occupancy for every floor, and we understand how the space is going to be used. And they came to us and it's like, nobody's on these floors. We're having mild temperatures right now. Let's not even run the units. Nobody's there. Well, if there's 2 people on the floor, I know they're calling for more ventilation, but am I doing more harm with ventilation than if I've just got 2 people on the floor?
Right.
It was a game changer for them. The other non-COVID thing that happened is owner operator, large tenant. It was in 16 floors of the building. On their lease, they were set to run Saturdays from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Got the data, but also what's unique too is the occupier that was direct metered by the utilities. So their air handling unit was on the utilities meter. So it's the owner, why do they really care? Because the tenant's paying the bill for everything. But we took this occupancy data. The owner went and met with the tenant and said, listen, we understand, you asked for this in your lease, but looking at the data, you might have 4 or 5 people that come in the weekend. You have 16 floors. We're turning them all on. And, we're not sure, there's probably a better way that we could, optimize the energy that's being used. And the tenant's first response to the owner was, well, we negotiated really hard to have that in the lease. And then the owner's response back to them was, hey, just want to remind you that you're paying Con Edison directly for that usage. And then their response is, well, why are we running all the units? Let's come up with a better solution. And so it becomes the data helps, instead of you just being the landlord tenant, now you're working with them to
Right.
help run the asset, but then also you're helping them run their business as well and manage their own expenses.
Yeah. Absolutely. So maybe we can talk a little bit about just keeping an eye on the time here. We've probably just got a couple minutes left to make sure that we've got time for questions that I know have come in. So you mentioned, the importance of AI, machine learning earlier, and that's, I think, been one of the massive game changers over the past, let's say, 10 years. Maybe can you walk us through a little bit how AI works in a building? How can you leverage AI ML and for those positive outcomes?
Right. So there's a couple things that go into it. Is we think about traditional energy efficiency measures. So we hear the energy conservation measures, ECMs, and it's like a static pressure reset, supplier temperature reset, optimum stop in your building. And traditionally, those are siloed algorithms that are dependent on the BMS provider and who programmed them and set them up. And sometimes they persist. A lot of the times they don't over time once their commission operators make changes to it. But it's also can be dependent on that one individual at that one instance of time of when they wrote that algorithm and came up with that equation. So what we're doing is at PD is we're taking, the concepts that we're doing aren't net new, but with us leveraging ML and AI, instead of us optimizing the start of a building just by a couple variables, now we're able to bring in lots of different variables, and some of them are external, but then also a machine learning model is powered by data. And the more data that it collects, the smarter it's going to get. And so as more buildings are added to our platform, the AI is making those models more and more intelligent, and our customers are seeing the benefit of that. And so instead of you going in with just a snapshot of, hey, this is what I paid for, I met the specification, I wrote exactly how the engineer had it, I tested it, the commissioning agent signed off on it. And then, hey, now we know that there's drift in the building. Let's come back every 5 years, and the utility is going to pay us the money to do retro commissioning to solve for that drift. AI and ML is solving for that in real time every single day, and it's getting smarter and smarter. And so our customers are seeing the benefits of that. It's not that, hey, Nantum saved me 6% on this ECM, Nantum ECM this year, and I'll expect to just see 6% again next year. I might see 7 or 8 because it got smarter, and it became more efficient. And sometimes it's not just on the energy side. It's, hey, they didn't have the indoor air quality sensors like Kytera provides. Now that's a new data input that can go into the model. Yeah, we might not save as much energy, but we're going to save some. But now we're going to provide a better space for those tenants.
Yeah.
And helps you make smarter decisions. But then again, the system can make the decisions for you.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's been a massive game changer for us. I mean, I remember doing my first sort of analysis on a building, the air quality across the building. And there are so many different parameters, even when we think about IAQ, which is maybe a subset of IEQ. Even within IAQ, indoor air quality, you've got particulates, chemicals, CO2, potentially ozone, NOx. There's a whole range of things that matter, and they're also all interconnected. If you open the window, CO2 might go down, but PM might go up depending on what conditions are outside. If you ventilate more, then CO2 might go down, but VOCs might go up if there is an issue with your ductwork, et cetera, et cetera. There's so much complexity between these parameters that for a human to try to map that out is a really laborious task. And this is speaking from experience because I've gone through that labor of trying to map out each of these parameters over time, find the relationship between them, identify sort of what we'd call like the pollutant signatures that are telltale signs of X happening within the building. And that's a lot of work if you've just got 3 or 4 monitors across the space, let alone then when you've got 300 monitors in a building in every single room. And then when you have 60 buildings across your portfolio, and for a human to try to make sense of this is basically an insurmountable challenge. So having a machine that can do that work, identifying the patterns for you and saying, doing pattern recognition, finding out what the potential problems are, and then funneling that either back to a human or to a system like Nantum OS, it makes so much more sense. And it's, we'll be able to help buildings, orders of magnitude more efficiently by using systems like this than I think the traditional way of doing stuff.
Well, it's hard. I mean, you just ask somebody, what's an appropriate CO2 level? CO2 is not new in buildings. You've probably seen a big push in the last 15 years for it. But even today, a lot of even operators don't understand what's a good level. Now you've added IAQ with 5 other new variables to it. What does that mean, right? Is it good? Is it bad? And how do they interact with each other? I remember one of our customers is piloting IAQ and just trying to decide what they're going to do. And they started seeing crazy VOC spikes, maybe once or twice a week for a very short period of time.
Mm-hmm.
And it turns out the person that was sitting closest to the new IAQ sensor would paint their nails on occasion.
I love it.
But they didn't know what to do, and they hadn't seen it before. What is this? And they're panicking because these levels are, completely out of whack, and they feel like there's a problem and we need to solve it. But then it's just for a short window of time, right? And now, how do you take those types of learnings of like, maybe there are going to be some spikes once in a while if somebody walks by, but do you really need to take action to it, or can you recognize it and see those kind of things? I know that's a pretty simple example, but it's new. What does VOC mean? What's good? What's bad? What's the right number? Along with
Absolutely.
all the other variables.
Well, that one really hits home because my wife and I, whenever she paints her nails, I'm like, I can smell the VOCs. Like, let's open the windows and all right. So we've got a few minutes for questions. So we've got a few in here. First one is question: Kytera system. I think the Kytera system connect and analyze multiple buildings? So I'll just answer that quickly. And by the way, a note for everybody: if you have questions, please throw them in the Q&A box. That way they'll end up in one place. It can be tricky to try and dig them out of the chat, which might have other comments coming in. So if you do have a question, throw it in the Q&A. And to this one, yes, absolutely. The Kytera sensors can be mounted throughout a building, throughout multiple buildings. You can log into a dashboard, be it the Kytera dashboard or Nantum, for example, and get that same data either through Kytera dashboard, Nantum, across an entire building, across multiple buildings. So we'll support different floors within buildings so that you can pinpoint the correct location, addresses for buildings so that you can see correctly where they are geographically, and analyze your data in a way that makes sense because there is spatial relationships between the data. If CO2 is high over here, CO2 will eventually float across the building and become high over here. So it is really important, if you're installing sensors, I think of any type, that you are able to map them correctly to where they are in the space, and put them in the same building or put them in multiple buildings, etc. We've got a question here, probably for Aaron, I think. What would be the highest impact piece of building technology that I can implement?
Building operating system that brings all your data into a single platform that's ML and AI based to make better and smarter decisions.
Yeah, that makes sense.
We don't have to install a lot of new stuff. It's just a matter of putting a brain on all those smart nervous systems that you typically already have in your building.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Awesome. Thanks. There's another one here. Does the Kytera platform connect with MEP sensors? Do you guys have experience with airport IEQ? All right. So 2 questions there. I'm not sure exactly what is meant by connecting with MEP sensors, but I'll answer that to the best of my ability, which is that our sensors will support both what I would call sort of more traditional methods of communication, BACnet, Modbus. So that's something where you could, in an existing built environment, you could take a Kytera sensor, you could mount it on the wall, and you could plug it into the building management system using BACnet, and that data will be used however you'd use any other sort of traditional sensor, but with all the benefits of it being a Kytera sensor. You can also connect it to the cloud, and that data then can be pulled through an API into any other platform. Something, again, that's how you could, well, there are several ways where you could get your data into a platform like Nentum. And then the second half of the question was, do we have experience around airport IEQ? And the answer is yes. I'm not sure I can say which airports for NDA reasons, but yeah, we've worked on some projects for very large international airports, and happy to chat more about that. If you want to reach out to myself directly on LinkedIn, I can put you in touch with the people on our team that have worked on those projects. Probably got time for just a couple last ones. So over here, we've got, considering that my building does not already have a smart building platform, what would be the first steps for getting started? Yeah, Aaron, you can tackle that one.
Yeah, it depends on the type of the building. If it's one that you do need to put in a HVAC control system, be it Schneider or Johnson, you definitely need the hardware there that can control the units. Or if it's a smaller space that has unitary equipment, sometimes we can get away with just smart thermostats that are connected via Wi-Fi. So it just a lot depends on what are the mechanical systems that you have in the space. And you will see that throughout this little chat we've had, I focus a lot on energy, and it has a lot to do with HVAC. And the reason it does is because that's the largest variable load that we have in a building. Lighting used to be a really big topic and a big consumer of energy in buildings, but as we've seen the proliferation of LEDs and lights with motion sensors and things like that, you'll start to see that tends to drop off. So the biggest hanging fruit is HVAC control systems. But the foundational layer to energy management 101, is you need to track your energy consumption in real time at an interval level of data. Looking at 1 week, 1 month on your energy bills isn't going to cut it. You've got to see, how that building behaves day by day, hour by hour, typically 15-minute interval, to understand, where the potential is for energy savings and optimization.
Makes sense. And I just add to that I think that's one of the, it's a good point to mention, that we can do so much now by having high frequency data. It's the same thing with air quality. What you can understand from having a reading every 5 minutes, every 10 minutes, every 15, but really ideally every 1 or every 5 minutes is completely different. It's a complete game changer. To really understand what is happening within a space, you need to be able to track changes. Sometimes it's not the absolute value that's the most important. It is, how is the system changing? When, let's say, the HVAC system is turned off, what happens to the air quality? Just having a data point that says the air was good and now the air is bad really limits what you can do. And so that's why continuous monitoring has been such a game changer. You can see the rate of change of VOCs, for example. That means that we can calculate the off-gassing rate in a space. That means that we can make better decisions for other conference rooms, for example, about what type of furniture we put in them, whether or not we use carpets. And I mean, it's the same thing with energy data. Having each of those data points is going to mean that you can make a lot of better decisions. Seem to have a phone ringing. Sorry about that. I think we are out of time. I know there's one more question that we didn't get to, but just to be respectful of everyone's time, we'll probably take that one offline and follow up afterwards. So at this point, I just want to thank Aaron for sharing your time with us today, all the insights. Thank you, everybody, for the questions that were brought in. It's a lot of really great questions. This recording will be sent to you afterwards. So for anybody that didn't make it to the end, has to drop off early, you'll get a recording. Feel free to share this with your colleagues. And there'll also be a feedback form. If there's anything that you'd like to see us talk more about, do differently in the future, please do let us know. Our goal is to be able to bring awesome content to everybody here. So again, thank you to all the participants, and a big thank you to Aaron for joining us in this discussion today.
Thanks, everyone.